Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers. If it's Friday, it's Newsmakers TV. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, February 3rd, and we are joined by our all-star panel of top local journalists, Ryan P. Cruz, Callie Fausey from The Independent, along with executive editor Nick Welsh, and Josh Molina of the You Better Answer My Phone Calls Noozhawk organization.
Now, Jerry, how come Ryan gets a middle initial?
Well, I was just going counterclockwise because I'm left-handed.
Yeah, but Callie could have a middle initial, and
Separate me
Josh
from all
probably
the
has.
other-
You'll have to take that up with Ryan. I don't know. Is there a Ryan S. Cruz we should
There's
know?
too many of us, so I had to differentiate.
All right. Okay. Not to pivot to something unhappy, but we had the multiple incidents of anti-Semitic displays in Santa Barbara and on Verone's this week, which follows only by a month earlier. Callie, what happened first of all?
Well, so there were about 3 what you could call anti-Semitic incidents in Santa Barbara County. The first one, or first 2, I guess, were some scrawlings across a UCSB chalkboard that was basically saying negative things about Israel, and then there were flyers spread out across Isla Vista with anti-Semitic messages, and then a swastika was found on a pole at Dos Pueblos High School.
Wow. And Ryan, is there a connection between all these other than dimwit anti-Semites?
So if you recall the end of last year, or right around Hanukkah, there was a similar event on the Mesa and some other neighborhoods in Santa Barbara. Now those were connected to the ones that were passed out in IV, and it's this group. We don't really want to name them because they get, they want to be named. They kind of want credit for these type of things, but it's a group it's a nationwide group that hands out these anti-Semitic messagings about how Jewish people are either homophobic, racist, pedophilia, refers to all these different things. So those 2 are connected. The writings on the chalkboard seem to be more directed towards Israel and sort of an Israel-Palestine type of tone. That they happened right after the Holocaust Remembrance Day. That kind of that seems to me why they're connected. And then the Dos Pueblos one, I think that that doesn't strike me as something outside the bounds of what you would see graffitied on a high school. But in the context of it happening right after that, I think that's why DP wanted to go ahead and make a statement.
Yeah, and of course the Board of Supervisors just passed a kind of a beefed up Holocaust Remembrance.
Yeah, it's strange that we're seeing this, come about. I mean, not strange. You see kind of the far right that's been bubbling up, and this is kind of just that in real life. We're seeing these ideas that we thought, growing up were old or dead. They're not dead at all, and they're getting stronger.
Yeah,
It keeps coming back, and it's interesting that the group that is sending out the flyers, the leader of the group has moved. I think he was up in Petaluma, and he has now moved to Miami. But he operates kind of a Mary Kay anti-Semitic operation. So if you're some sort of homegrown anti-Semite and you don't have the stuff to throw out, he has it all prepackaged and he'll mail it to you for a fee. So he's working it. It's like anti-Semitism as a college industry.
so it's a revenue stream basically.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing a lot of similar attacks across the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Callie, at the risk of getting all of many of my friends mad at me, being anti-Semitic is not necessarily the same as being anti-policy of Israel, especially with the Netanyahu government in power now. Now you've studied the politics and history of the Mideast for the last 3,000 years for a long time. But I mean, that's not unusual necessarily on college campuses, right? I mean, it seems to me that that's a very kind of active political question that comes up a lot. Israel's policies, whether it's in terms of settlements or other things, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily anti-Semitic, but it's definitely not. There is another anti-word for it that is slipping from me. But yes.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think, Ryan, you're probably correct in distinguishing.
I think when you put it in the context of it being, these were students, or we don't know if it's students, whoever was on the campus, they knew that this classroom was an Israeli politics classroom, that it was an Israeli policy teacher of Jewish descent. So I think that was a targeted aspect of it. But yeah, like you say, being anti-Israel there's different levels of this.
Yeah, well, I just remember from my days overseeing the Daily Nexus that this was often something that erupted in the context of some story about Israeli politics or what was happening with the refugees and so on. So, okay, all right. Anyway, it's not good, and the timing particularly is not good. And it's just our country dissolves more and more as we continue through this human extinction event. Josh, speaking of human extinction events, a lot of housing news this week. You had an exclusive interview with Lisa Plow, the planning director, who was apparently not happy with your previous reporting on how they screwed up the timing on the housing element. What did she have to say for herself?
Well, I don't know the point of doing journalism if you're not offending people. And you are correct. I did an interview with a planner, Jessica Steele, and she told me the truth. She told me everything about how we got to where we got with the housing element update. And apparently she said too much. So now I've been ordered to only talk to Lisa Plowman. And so that's what I did. And so I talked to her on Monday, and she was doing a preemptive strike to sort of say, hey, before you write about our housing element that's coming out, here's why we need to focus all the messaging on the need for housing and not on our process for missing the state deadline, or more importantly, the sites they've identified. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, Jerry, is that what I've learned is this whole thing, this whole housing element update, you know who has all the power? It's not the activists, and it's not the housing activists. It's not even those people who don't want more housing or tall buildings, and it's not the elected officials.
The cannabis growers?
It's who've been doing nothing for 30 years, and it's certainly not the environmental groups. It's the property owners, because what the county has done is gone to all these property owners and said, hey, can we rezone your land for housing? Because the state really wants us to find real sites, not fake sites. And if we put your name on the list, we want to know that you have an interest in turning your property into housing. The property owners that said yes are in the housing element. The property owners who said no are not. And so obviously this is capitalism. We can't force property owners to build housing. We can't, there's no mechanism for that. But I think we need to be more honest with what's going on. The Glen Annie Golf Club owners have told the county, yes, we would love to turn that into housing. That's why they're on the site. Montecito Country Club is another golf course, right? They don't want to turn that into housing. Why should all the housing rezones be in the Eastern Goleta Valley, right? And so while they'll poke fun and say, oh, sorry, Goleta, you guys are being territorial, who loses, right? It's the fact that, sure, we want more housing, but how come we don't see any at the La Cumbre Country Club in Hope Ranch? How come we don't see any at the Montecito Country Club? The reason is those people would never, ever do that. So where's all the housing going to go? It's going to go in the places where people have shown an interest. So the property owners are running this show, and we're going to see more housing on the Glen Annie Golf Club site, the San Marcos Grower site, possibly the Magnolia Shopping Center. There are 2 properties in Carp owned by the Van Wingerdens that will.
What a shock.
What are we, 9 minutes in? Okay.
The Van Wingerdens, do they have any, do they support anybody politically, Josh, that you're aware of?
Yeah. The person who's saying we're going to lose another generation of housing if we don't build this 685 project in La Cumbre Plaza, even though he's been in office for almost 20 years. But we don't have to go there now. What we know is that the housing element is being controlled by the property owners. No, there's not a site in the county where the county has said we're going to rezone that, whether you want us to or not, because they're afraid the state will hit them on the fist, hit them on the hand and say, that's a fake site. We want real development. So it's a tough spot for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where the pressure is coming in, allowing the property owners a little bit more power than usual, because the state, I mean, counties and jurisdictions for years with this housing element,
Yeah, I mean, that's what the state wanted.
they've been marking, sites that with no intention of actually building it, saying, we can station off this, and they'll meet their arena numbers, but they never really built those. And after so many cycles, the state is now putting their foot down and saying, no, we need sites that are viable. So now it's forcing all these counties and cities into a corner where they have to scramble and try to get whatever sites are available. And like Josh said, it's not, if you own a country club or a golf course in Montecito or some good property out there, you probably aren't going to want to go for housing. So it did kind of switch that power. Now.
Nick, is it unusual that they would have survey the landowners but not bother with the neighbors, many of whom seem kind of upset about this in Carp and in Goleta?
I think that the question answers itself. The reality is that if the county or any local government is trying to make a case that this is a viable possibility, at least, if you don't have the property owners on board, you're dead in the water to start with. I think the state probably starts with the perspective that, of course, the neighbors are against it, because that's the reason California is in the problem it's in right now. The neighbors have always been against it. Everybody loves housing unless it's next to my house. And, we're all like that. So, I think the state's saying, if you don't have a willing property owner, you're just shucking and jiving and we're wasting my time. And of course the neighbors are against it. What else is new?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so they're just gonna run
I
over
mean,
all
I just
the
want to say,
opposition?
I want to say, of course, the neighbors are against it. Thank God neighbors were against Elwyn Mesa, against the Douglas Family Preserve Wilcox property, against Mora Mesa. Thank God we have neighbors. But the problem is that the county's trying to make this debate of like, we need more housing and we cannot continue to fail people because there's too many vehicle miles traveled from Oxnard and Santa Maria. No SHIT, like no kidding, of course. The problem is everybody is blaming everybody else for a problem that government has created. Why can't we rezone the government sites? Why can't we put the housing on the property the government owns? The solution is not going to be just private developers. They're never going to solve the housing crisis. The solution has to be government figuring out a way to build on their land, on their sites, on their properties, so that they can put their money where their mouth is.
All right.
Well, the county is doing that with housing for the homeless people right now. There's 4 sites that they're talking about where they're going to have somewhere like 400 interim units of housing for the homeless if all goes according to plan. So they are starting to step up a little bit, but you're right. I mean, there's a lot of government land. There's a lot of church land. The other sort of big pregnant opportunity here is churches. They have lots of real estate. They have no debts. They pay no taxes. You can do affordable housing there, and you could say to you, the developer wouldn't have the argument anymore. Like, oh my God, my mortgage rates are off the chart. I have to pay for the real estate. Church land is relatively cheap compared to other lands.
All right. I despair. Okay.
Say we build it by you, Jerry. How about that?
Huh?
We build it by you. You got some property out there.
Well, yeah, and the neighbors hate
Take
them.
it to donkeys. Take it to donkey.
You gotta love the smell of horses to really build property here. Hey, Callie, you had a piece about this mysterious and weird Toro Canyon oil leak spill litigation, county attacks county story. What's the latest on that? We talked about it a couple of weeks ago.
So there's no really new update on the litigation. The DA's office is still trying to get these public documents from the county council. And they still need to file a response to the county's original demur to their public records request. They said that they'll probably file that sometime in March before their court hearing in April. But the newest update is that the County Board of Supervisors approved a contract between Pacific Petroleum and the Public Works Department to pay for what Pacific Petroleum has already cleaned up since the last oil spill on January 1st, and also any ongoing maintenance as they work to repair everything that was damaged as part of the oil containment system during the last spill.
So the
That was
county's
650,000, right?
$650,000. Yeah, and it wasn't budgeted. It's just coming out of that 1.5 million that the county allocated in 2022 for the maintenance of the creek and the oil.
so the county is now going to take on the responsibility that should have been a private company, if I got
Yeah.
that right.
You got that right. But you know, the private company went out of business, what about after they discovered water? So somewhere around like 1900, they went out of business. So this is sort of an old wound that had been oozing for about 125 years now.
Well, I think you covered that originally.
I
you
did
not?
back in
Yeah.
1900.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I noticed that Supervisor Williams did make that point about the government taking on the responsibility of the private company. But as you say, there's no way for the private company to do it. I mean, if the government doesn't do it, it's just going to keep oozing.
Well, no, I think Josh's point is that is the problem with oil is by the time, you know, the mess needs to be cleaned up, the people who are responsible for it are long gone. So the taxpayers wind up subsidizing a private enterprise that you might not want in the first place
Yeah.
by taking over the cleanup responsibility.
Yeah.
But I'm putting words in his mouth.
Yeah, well, fortunately, because we're up to our eyeballs in those excess cannabis revenues that are going to fund the future, we can afford to do this. Ryan, that we had the first meeting of the revamped Fire and Police Commission, which sounded a lot like the old Fire and Police Commission with our good friend Lizzie Rodriguez, who used to operate a camera when we were still in the studios at TVSB. What was different, and what was your takeaway on it?
Yeah, it is a long time coming and not very exciting the first time, obviously, because there wasn't much to do. The first order of business was a small taxi cab appeal, but something like that wouldn't have been, you know, live streamed in the public eye in city council before. So I think that's the big thing. You could go to meetings before. It was definitely you had to find the room. You had to really be looking for it. Now you can watch on live stream, and you know, I think it's what's going to happen in the future, or what could happen, and just the fact that we have a different police commission that can handle, you know, if we have some sort of incident with the police in Santa Barbara of you know, something like we've seen across the country. Now we have a public forum that it would go through. So I think that's the big story, not so much, you know, what's happening there. We did get some reports from the fire chief and police chief. You know, I think the police chief got ahead. That was right before the Tyree Nichols video came out. She said something about to the effect of, you know, I understand that, you know, even though we try to do things the right way, that people will lose trust in police in general. That means Santa Barbara police, everybody, because of what happened. So she kind of got ahead of that.
Well, the one issue that's kind of on the front burner, though, you know, this awful murder that took place
Yeah, she did. She also spoke on that, and you know, they didn't give much info afterwards. I can personally understand that, because when you say somebody was shot and then you let it out in the media that guy died, and right away you're kind of letting those people know that we're involved. You know, get out of town. Don't be around. There's a murder warrant out for you. I can understand that. I can understand the criticism, but she addressed that and said, you know, they let as much info as they could. That's a problem with trust and in police nowadays, and with media and everybody. It's hard to trust if the police are really giving you the whole story. So people are shell shocked, and you know, there's definitely been some people very upset about that.
Nick,
I mean, that was
see
such a high profile horror story in a way that it is surprising it didn't get more ink at the time. But you know, to have some poor schmo visiting Santa Barbara from Camarillo out enjoying
with his
Sherman
family?
Park. So, yeah, and it's Christmas vacation, and oops, he just gets in the crossfire of, not a crossfire, but accidentally shot by some West Siders or whoever they're claiming did it. Yeah, it's a terrible story. I guess for me, just and it needs to be dealt with. But again, what Ryan said is that if all of a sudden you said, by the way, the guy we thought was wounded is now dead, and you're looking at a murder rap as opposed to, you know, a shooting, it's going to be that much harder to arrest them. And you know, typically, you know, cops play that stuff extremely tight. It's just,
So you don't see any difference in the way the new chief handled this and the way Barney Malakian or Lori Luna were?
you know, not really. I think part of the issue is it's a new chief. She's been here on the job 4 months. A lot of people aren't familiar with her yet. She's been sort of doing the subterranean meet and greet exercise and trying to get herself familiar with the who's who of Santa Barbara, and hasn't become sort of a, you know, a face that you see all the time on KYT or anywhere else. So, you know, it's premature to say. I kind of have been a little bit startled by Bill McFadden's, well, we've had 3 fatwa jihads on
Well, there do
Noozhawk.
seem to be a lot of people getting shot. I mean, there was this other guy on the west side, right, this week?
Well, that was reported immediately, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, but Bill seems to be, well, Bill's upset about 2 things. Bill McFadden, he's upset, A, that there's gang violence and that people are getting shot. And B, he seems to be really upset that the chief is not kicking down info when he wanted.
And I can understand that, but the gang thing, I think we always have to be very careful about, especially in this community. When the police say it's gang related, then we can say that. But until then, I fear that, you know, when somebody sees a Latino name in the west side or east side, they assume, at least on social media from what I see in comments, they assume that it's gang related, and then it's kind of stoking that fire in this community of, you know, people thinking that it's unsafe or there's this huge gang war. And if that's
Right.
happening, we should be on top of it. We should be holding people accountable. But
And to follow up on that, I mean, this is sort of what Bill is doing harkens back to the good old days of yellow journalism, when newspaper publishers would talk about, you want a crime wave? I can manufacture a crime wave. You know, any newspaper can make it seem like we are in the throes of this tidal wave of out of control barbarians at the gate. And I think McFadden is kind of going there here. One of the things I'm just going to take a cheap shot here. You know, McFadden.
Now, you know, you're making it so I have to have McFadden on the show now, you know.
Okay. McFadden says, as a journalist, I did this, or as a journalist, I feel this. Just because you own the San Francisco 49ers does not make you a quarterback. Just because you own a team doesn't make you a football player. And Bill McFadden is not a journalist. He is an owner of a news outlet.
All right, thank you very much.
Did he ever call the chief of police and say, hey, Callie, how do you spell your last name? How come you're not talking to me? I would bet you $1,000 he never placed that call.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out.
Can I say one thing, Jerry, before we move on here?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's dig deeper into this now.
No, I'm not like taking a side on this because I have not been reporting on any of this, but I would just say in general, I think we have to, as journalists, and I'm talking about just all journalists, okay? When we let government tell us that they can't provide us information because we think that information is going to somehow harm what we need to do, whether that's law enforcement or public policy, I think that we as journalists, it's our job to question that and push back on that, because it is a very slippery slope. And we do not want government to decide what is newsworthy. We don't want that. So in this situation, I don't know the right answer, but what I do know is I think we should err on the side of demanding more from our government than less, because they should be able to solve these crimes, even if there's some information in our local media most of the time. So I just want to sort of.
Yeah.
Well, and I
agree
think-
with you. I agree with you, but I would just say this, that it's one thing to say we need to have information, but where's the information on the crime stats overall to say we're in the midst of a crime wave? Or
Yeah, I would definitely like to
streets
see
are out of
that.
control.
How are the east side and west side being affected? And
Well,
not
what
just
did the chief
ideas
say
of
at the police and fire commission? Did she not make a report on where we
He
are?
said overall crime is down.
It's just
so-
murders that are up.
Well,
I
even
think-
then, you know, we're pretty low on that list. You know,
think
we should
property crimes have been up.
definitely, we've seen
property
that.
crimes-
I definitely have seen that. You've seen the glass breaking everywhere and break-ins. I think that is something that needs to be focused on. The idea of a gang war that needs, I think you should always tread lightly, especially in this community. It can lead to people having ideas of young brown men just because of the way they look. And you just have to be very careful about that. These guys need to be held accountable. If it's for a gang, this fight or anything, that needs to be taken care of. They need to address that. But you've got to be very careful when we're treading about that.
I would say amen.
All right. Well, I mean, I would just add that both the city and the county do a very lousy job of responding to freedom of information requests and do everything they can to make it difficult to get that information, particularly the county counsel's office. The fact that the district attorney has to go to court to get information out of county council is absurd. All right, speaking of government agencies that don't have any money to pay for stuff, Callie, you followed this recent strike out at UCSB, well, and throughout the UC system, and there was a settlement, there was an agreement about higher salaries, but now it appears that UCSB does not have the money to finance it. Is that right?
So basically, the UCSB told me that they don't know exactly what the budgetary impact of the raises are going to be at this time. But yeah, I feel like UCs across the board are scrambling to figure out how they're going to fund these significant wage increases. And so they've been considering cutting graduate student enrollment, which just directly goes against the commitment that the UC's made to the state of increasing graduate student enrollment.
Yeah, so
We have to pay you more, so we're just not going to have you on campus anymore.
So there's a proposal, what, to reduce the number of graduate students, researchers in the chemistry department? Am I?
Yeah, so according to the academic senate divisional chair, her department is the chemical engineering department, and they have been considering reducing graduate student enrollment by about 30 students.
Wow, okay, all right, well, I mean, it's such a, I mean, what are you gonna do with that? I mean, it's like, it's a catch-22. We want more money. Okay, we'll give it to you, except we don't have it. I mean, it's.
Here's the Nick Welsh stupid idea solution. first and second year UC students go to community colleges because you're going to get a better education at that level then, and then you move up.
Yeah, well, for basic courses, I could not agree with you more based on some personal experience. All right, let me go around real quick. Josh, you had Kristen Snedden, the mayor in waiting on your podcast this week, and she's very much in favor of the special plan proposal for La Cumbre. Did she have any thoughts on how to proceed with that, given the what we've talked about previously, that there's already a project that's been submitted for half of it, for the Macy's part anyway?
Well, I know that the issue is going to go before the council for a check-in and an update. And I think the city attorney is working on something as it relates to how to proceed. They're obviously reviewing the application, the pre-application from the Taylors. And I think that there's going to be some sort of effort to get people around a table to talk about how we can reset this. I think most of the council's on board with a specific plan, and they may decide to just let the Taylor project go and do something with the rest. That may be, but I don't think that's their goal. I think their goal is to figure out a way to work with the Taylors to allow them to do what they want, but still be within the confines of a specific plan, because nobody who actually knows anything about planning has said that that property should not be a specific plan. And Kristen Snedden knows that. And she also knows that it's not about housing now, it's about getting the most housing. And if you put the Taylors in the specific plan, you can require more affordable. Let's not forget, right now they've proposed 56 affordable units out of 685. And anyone who supports that and says they're for affordable housing is not telling the truth.
Yeah, and I thought she was pretty persuasive. I mean, it's not going to like delay it that significant amount of time longer to do that. And maybe that's why the Taylor guys want to move ahead, because they don't want to do that.
And they seem like good guys. Like they have Brian Cornell. I feel like they'd be down for working with the city if they had some assurances that this thing was not going to get tanked or take 25 years.
Yeah, Brian Cornell, architect to the stars. Ryan, you had a little piece about, well, it wasn't a little piece. You had a piece about ADUs, the future of all of us. Why isn't the city moving more effectively or more quickly to approve those? It seemed like that was going to be the lifeline to getting these units that we need.
Well, it's pretty easy to get them approved as long as you fit the specific criteria and you're not trying to build bigger or taller than the actual ordinance says. You can get apply right to building and safety, and it'll be done within 30 or 60 days. It's the few of them that want to go outside of that are the ones that are taking longer. Now, these new ordinance changes are to make it in line with the state laws, which is pushing more ADU production, because ADUs welcome workers, people that are starting, getting their first apartment, and it's it's kind of.
So did the council make it easier to get them approved?
It's as easy as it can be right now. There's objective standards, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible, but I think it's people have to just go ahead and start applying. And we've had 900 applications since 2017, and we're one of the top in the state in that. So if we keep pushing that, I mean, that's kind of a good way to bring affordable housing, because like Josh said, we have these big idea housing projects that are giving 10, maybe 20%. If it's the big ones on Milpas is giving 20%, but even then that's moderately affordable. And then if our median income's 100,000, then what's moderately affordable? So these ADUs, they are, I mean, in the market, they've been more affordable when you look them up. We don't know if there's going to be any way of keeping that low and making sure that ADUs are low. We might see something in the future of that, but
and I want to say, Jerry, I want to use Ryan P. Cruz as an example.
Yeah, make
All
sure
the
it's the right Ryan Cruz.
All the politicians, they all say we need housing, the activists too, for our teachers and our firefighters and our nurses, okay? And we're building housing for tech workers. We're building housing for people who make a lot of money, who can have luxury, small, but really nice new units. We need to be figuring out a way to any elected official who's listening to have people like Ryan P. Cruz, who grew up here in this community, who choose to stay here and invest back in this community, who's a product of the community college system, works at the Independent, and does as important a work as anyone in this community to be able to live here and someday buy a home here. Nobody is talking about that. They're talking about the people who give money to their campaigns, the firefighters, the nurses, the police officers. They're not saying
Van Wingerden.
the little kid who grew up on the west side and the east side and Old Town and who had to move because his parents rented. And I'm including myself in there, but I'm a little bit different because I'm older now and I have a little bit more, but not for very long. You know, I had to fight for a lot. Ryan, no one is saying, I want the people who grew up here to be able to stay here and give back to the community. No one is talking about those people. And that's what's really offensive by the politicians who talk about, we can't lose another generation of people to not enough housing, because no, we can't. But what have you been doing this whole time? And let's stop talking about the people who give money to campaigns and talk about people who actually went to local schools. And God bless you, Ryan, for understanding that ADU meeting, because I've watched it 5 times now and I still don't understand what they did. It was very technical and processy, but it sounds like they're making strides and the ADU programs working really well in Santa Barbara.
Well, Callie, you're an alum of Santa Barbara High, so you're also in the cohort that Josh addresses. Do you associate yourself with his remarks, which will be available in leather bound volumes right after the show, or do you believe in capitalism?
Oh my God. I think I do identify myself with that. I went to Santa Barbara High School, but I had to use my aunt's address to go there because my dad and I lived in Carpinteria. We could only live in a house in Carpinteria because my grandmother bought it for us. And my dad couldn't afford to buy a house here. He couldn't afford to get a place somewhere in Santa Barbara, even though my father's an accountant. He makes decent money and he still couldn't afford to live in the city near my school. So I had to use my aunt's address. Don't tell SBHS, but yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
void your diploma. And when you return from earning a degree from the University of San Francisco, go Dons, where you also edited the newspaper, were you immediately able to put a down payment on a house in Santa Barbara and look forward to making your mortgage payments with what they pay, the lucrative salary they pay you at the Santa Barbara Independent?
So I am lucky that I had friends who I was planning to live with when I came back to Santa Barbara, who I lived with in Isla Vista when school was all remote, and it was horrible. We lived next to a frat house that constantly blasted club music. But they did a lot of the house hunting and everything. And so right now I'm living in a 3-bedroom house with 3 other people. So we have 5 people living in a 3-bedroom, and I actually pay more in rent for a smaller room than I did for my apartment in San Francisco.
Really? In
Yeah.
San
Wow.
Francisco? Wow.
Yeah,
That is a lot.
definitely getting to be, from that rental story I wrote and people I talked to, it used to be, from what I've seen, in Santa Barbara, you grew up here, you went to UCSB, and it was okay. You could get a job and you could stay here. And that's the teachers I grew up with were UCSB graduates. The people that, worked in the businesses or owned the businesses that I worked at were all in that same boat. And that's just not really as accessible anymore, where you could grow up and be like, hey, I really like the community here. I went to school here. I want to stay. You can't really do that it's much harder.
That's because all those teachers and all those professors, bought homes 30 years ago and never sold them, and are still, enjoying their Proposition 13 tax break. Hey, Nick, we're over, but I gotta ask you real quick, an important story that you have this week, about the 5150s, that there's a pilot program going on.
Yeah, it just started. This is a small deal, but it's a really big deal. 5150 is a term it's used for people who are in such distress that they pose a threat either to themselves or others, imminent threat. And it usually it results in a 72-hour involuntary hold. And Santa Barbara is the only one of California's 58 counties, only one, where law enforcement officials, by policy and practice, do not issue 5150 holds. That has been, for many years, the sole province of people who work for the county's behavioral health department. Now, ER docs are allowed to do it too. This stems from the fact that we have 16 acute care beds in all of Santa Barbara County, and everybody else has to get shipped out hither, thither, and yon throughout the state.
So just because of what, we're the only one because we don't have enough beds and they are
I'm
afraid.
sure we are hardly the only one that doesn't have enough beds, but
Oh, okay. But we're the only one that doesn't allow law enforcement to do it. And the excuse is we don't have enough beds.
yeah. And so there's a pilot program that says, if you are a sheriff's deputy working on a co-response unit, and co-response is where they team up a sheriff with clinician from county behavioral wellness to go out there and intervene with people having a sort of acute care meltdown. Apparently there's some like 350 to 500, psychiatric mental health crisis calls to the sheriff a month. It's a lot. Allegedly, they're getting a lot more acute, where there's a lot more violence and a lot more suicidal issues. So it's a big deal. It's a hot issue. And so if you are a deputy working for one of the 3 co-response units in the county, you will now have the ability to issue a 5150 holds if your clinician is not there with you for whatever reason. So it's highly, highly, highly asterisk, but it's the first time ever. So it is the first chink in this just say no armor. They're gonna check the numbers to see what difference it makes, and then see if it's something they want to expand even further.
All right. Well, we got to go, but Ryan P. Cruz and Callie, I want to commend you. When the independence, I don't know what the hell it was, self-care issue or something that Sarah Sinclair can sell ads behind. Both of you wrote pieces which appeal to our core audience, which is those 80 years older and above. Ryan, you wrote about big toe booty, which I'm not going to really get into, but Callie, I was most interested in the grandmother workout that guarantees no vomiting. Did you yourself do this workout, and did you vomit?
I did. I myself did do this workout, and don't let the whole grandma workout fool you. It was hard.
Was it really?
Yeah, I was still like huffing and puffing, but that might just be because I don't exercise as much as I should.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, you don't have room in the house to do that, and the thing is on Zoom, and what are you going to do? And then big toe booty, Ryan, of course, is this guy who teaches you to walk correctly.
Dr. Brisby at the training room. Yeah, he'll teach you how you're not walking correctly now and how you can correct that and make sure you're doing the best for your body, because as we get older, as you know.
Really, I've heard that. Yeah. I could use that so I don't fall down once a week. Okay. We got to leave it there. Callie, Fausey, Nick Welsh, Josh Molina, Ryan P. Cruz. Thank you all for, as always, for taking the time to join the show. Thank you all for watching. Henry says goodbye, and we will see you next time on Newsmakers.